Not very often, but just occasionally it's useful to be able to change the format of an existing graph. More often than not, that's something you choose to do after you've got a graph and you look at it and you think, for whatever reason, you want to change the colours or you want to change the layout. And there are many options already available on the built-in menus to change the format of an existing graph. But obviously, if you're drawing a graph and you know that you want to make the format a bit different, then there is a format tab as part of the graph draw process. And the most common reason to go there actually is to choose that you want to say draw a snapshot or a tornado, because to be honest with you, the auto formatting selection in the results program works pretty well. The fact you get line graphs for instantaneous results and column charts for aggregate charts, and the fact that it automatically adds up different elements for the same result is generally quite effective at getting what you want first time. Whereas obviously you can't tell whether or not you want to have a snapshot or not. So let's suppose I was going to draw a graph of, suppose we were going to do resource operating charge for several resources and several scenarios. So I could pick, let's say, DSL shelf and DSL DSLAM chassis. That's two different resources. And I could pick operating charge as my result, and I could go and pick 3 scenarios, and obviously that by itself would give me just a time series graph with lots of lines. And so if I want to say I want to have a snapshot, then as we've seen in the previous video, you go to the format tab and you say I'd like this basis to be a snapshot, and then I get a snapshot chart which will have 2 different elements on the legend, and it's got 3 different scenarios here. And as in the 7.4 results program, you can do all things before to change that, so you can right click and choose period and group, and you can say I want to group it by element, and you'd get the other kind of snapshot, and that all works exactly as before. So that's one specific reason for using the format tab. Now, just occasionally you might want to change the built-in layout, and I'm going to show you a slightly contrived example where you might want to do that. So I'm going to draw the same graph again, but this time I'm just going to pick a single resource, so we'll just have the shelf, single resource, single graph, and 3 scenarios. And this time I'm not going to touch the format tab, I'm going to leave it with its default settings, and we'll just see what we get. And what we get is a not stacked chart, because as far as it's concerned, it has no reason to think that you would want to add up the results of different scenarios. It will add up different elements, but in general it won't add up scenarios. So suppose you actually knew you wanted to change this. Well, in situ you can just go here and you go graph type and you'd say make it stacked. But suppose you wanted to do that when you're actually drawing the graph. Well, then obviously that's what the format tab is for, and we just do the same thing again, graph draw, and we go DSL shelf, operating charge, same scenarios, and then we go to the format tab. Then you do have the ability to say, well, actually I'd like this to be a stacked chart. And this is a slightly silly example because actually it still has the offset of the series that it does before, so it's got a 40% offset, and if you really want it to look like if you like, the stacked chart you would be expecting, then actually you'd have to go in here and say go into the layout and change that overlap to be 100%, like that, which is a bit funny because if I put it back to automatic, which is, well, that's even funnier, isn't it? Automatic was supposed to be 40, okay, very buggy. So exactly, okay, right, so you see, I think that in here, I think if you go graph type and you first of all have it like this, and then if you go graph type and do this, then I think, oh no, it doesn't. Okay, so I'm not sure. I think when you say stacked, I think you kind of expect it to be actually stacked like this, not like this. But anyway, that's for a development discussion. So that's one thing you might want to do, and another thing you might want to do is you might want to change how a table would look. So if I do the same graph again, graph draw, and it's DSL shelf, and it's operating charge, and it's those 3 scenarios. If I choose to do it as a table, and let's just make sure this is back to normal, so everything unset here, then if I just do it as a table, then by default I'll get a table where basically the logic says if I have more than one series, then it puts time across and the series go down. And again, I can change the layout in situ as before with the layout thing, but if I knew from the start off that I wanted to have the series across, then again I can use that table, use the format tab. So I'd go graph, draw, same thing, elements, graphs, scenarios, blah blah blah, across to format, and now I can go into the table orientation settings, and this obviously doesn't change the graph if you draw a graph, but it will change the table you will get later if you change it to a table. And so if I say I want to specifically have my series across and draw it as a table, then that's exactly what I'm going to get. So those are the same formatting options that you would have had in the STEM 7.4 Draw New interface. And so the difference here is that even when you're going graph draw, you have the option to override the options from the graph draw, which it's not, you're not going to do it very often, but it could be handy. So in a sense, the functionality is more complete now. And there are also two new options which I can't demonstrate yet because they're not implemented, but we'll look at them anyway. And go through the same interface one more time. So we've got DSL shelf, we've got operating charge, and we've got 3 scenarios, and we go across to format. Then, as well as the graph options that we had here, like we had from before, and the table options, there are 2 more choices to do with so-called blanks you might have on a chart, and neither of these are implemented yet, but there will be an option that will automatically hide any series which are identically 0 all the way through the model run. And independent of that, there will be another option that will temporarily hide any series that are temporarily unavailable. So for example, if a scenario hasn't been run, and if it's present on a graph from before, then the values will go to NA, they'll appear as NA in the table, and the line will disappear from the chart, but it'll still appear on the legend. With this option, it would suppress it from the chart altogether, and same for the 0 values. And the important distinction to make here is that these are temporarily hidden, so it's a formatting option. They exist in the chart, but they will be hidden if they currently are of no consequence. And I have to differentiate that behavior from 2 very similar options which are intended to appear in the dialog, which allows you to remove series from a chart. And I can't show you that yet because it's not finished, but in due course, when you go to the dialog to remove series from a chart, that will have 2 buttons that allow you to select all the ones that are currently 0 or that are currently unavailable, and then to remove them. But the point is that would be permanently removing, so they would never appear on that chart again. Whereas this option here is a formatting option, which is to simply suppress them for as long as they have no consequence. But of course it would mean they would come back if you subsequently rerun those scenarios, or if the values became non-zero. The formatting tab is not very exciting, and if we've done our work well, you won't often need to come here at all, but it's just nice to know that it does all the things that it did before and then some, and it can be used on predefined graphs as well as a draw new context.